Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Sales Chatter, the podcast, live show, industry show that we help 10,000 sales reps generate $1 million GP in under 12 months. Today is Data Day, and today we've got our usual suspects, the king of data, Mr. Dean Cook, and we've got Jeff always reading himself and updating his. Oh, he's got the book right side up today. That's good.
Oh, good. Hey, you know what? I'm reading The Great Logistics Reset. What a great topic we're going to be talking about today. Seriously.
Yeah. Interesting topic that we're talking about today. I had no idea until I was speaking with somebody yesterday, and they're like, you know what? I just went to the gas station, and so we're obviously liters in Canada, not gallons, and it was up 20 cents a liter. And immediately I went like, what? Yesterday it was $1.52. And today it was like $1.75. It went up like 22, 23 cents a liter overnight. And I've always had one question. So, and maybe some of y'all have had this question or you've asked it. A gas station puts 50,000 liters under the ground, right? They paid for that when it got dropped off. If gas goes up, they have already paid for that. So this whole, I don't know about you guys in the US, but in Canada, we got this sticker on the gas pumps, and it shows where every cent of the gas is going, right? And the profit is like this skinny little thing. And I'm like, okay, first of all, that's got to be bullshit, because if you put it in the ground at say $1 and it goes up to $1.50, when you bought that stuff going in the ground, it was $1. So now you're making 50 cents. I don't know. Maybe I'm totally ignorant to it, Dean. You'd be able to help me on that. But I don't know. To me, it's like prices got raised to a point where everybody freaks out. Then when it drops 10 cents, like, oh man, that's a good deal. But it's like, I mean, I remember when it cost me to fill up my Durango RT, it cost me like $35. Right. Now it's like $200. And obviously, I do understand. I was in my 20s when that happened, so it was only like 6 years ago. But yeah.
Data. Get off those meds. Get off those meds.
Right? Yeah. So yeah, you know what I'm saying. Does anybody? You guys ever feel like that as well, or is that just me?
Oh, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, it's like my wife's uncle, owned a farm, and he used to buy his gas at X, and then he would say almost the exact same thing. I'm not buying 100 gallons. I'm going to buy 250 gallons at this rate, because it's going to save me money in the long run. So it's the same thing, buy low, sell high. I mean, that happens in all industries.
It's interesting you said that, Jeff. My son and I, not last winter, the winter before, we were up in Blind River, which is about 7 hours north of me. And we pulled into this gas station. The guy says, I'm out of super. I said, you're out of super? He goes, yes, somebody just came in and bought 2,000 liters. I'm like, okay, well, first of all, who the hell's has something to store 2,000 liters? And that means you need a gas truck to pump those 2,000 liters into.
Farmers.
And but farmers, shouldn't they buy, is it red diesel? I think it's,
no,
I believe it was called red diesel in Canada. Like farmers buy a different diesel. Right. Yeah. I think it's, if somebody's out there from Canada, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's red diesel, because this was a big thing I know there was, maybe a decade and a half ago, when fuel really started climbing, people started buying red diesel, which I guess is not
different excise, right?
So it's different
farm use only.
Yeah, for farm use only, exactly. And then it's obviously a lot cheaper. So then people were putting it in trucks, and they were actually testing it at the MTO and the DOT stops. So it's a different type of gas for farm, or I guess it's the same diesel gas. It's just cheaper for farmers, right?
Right. Yeah, because they're not on the road, right? So part of the road is the tax that you pay to. Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, so big jumps in diesel. It's got everybody's attention this week. Well, I don't know that retail prices have caught up just yet at the diesel pump, but they will. They will quickly.
Oh yeah.
This is our worst case scenario on our modelling, because we always had two, one pessimistic, one optimistic. Pessimistic was sort of our caveat to our recovery thesis, was that diesel prices sort of took off over the summer, which they want to do. This is sort of no surprise that they're doing this, but for some reason the EIA had forecast sub $4 down as close as $3.80 for the rest of the year. I don't think that's going to be the case. Experts say that this is just simply supply and demand, because it was a pretty big July in terms of demand, but it was also the biting effect of OPEC Plus taking out their oil production that they said they would do last month, or maybe the month before. So we do more miles in summer.
Yes.
I guess on the other side, we're not doing more miles in trucks because demand is not as high. But for those miles that carriers are doing that are still running, it's going to cost at least 3 to 4 cents a mile more to run a truck today than it did last week.
Yeah,
that's significant, because you and I all pay for that. The fuel surcharge that goes on top of all the rates has gone up 4 cents a mile, roughly 4 to 5 cents a mile, depending on where you are. So we all pay for that on top of the line haul rate to move freight. So that's
and that's if you're charging fuel and if you're on a fuel program.
Yeah,
spot market. Are you seeing an adjustment for that in the spot market yet?
Not yet. Well, I will know Sunday, because what happens is line haul rates go down as diesel prices go up. As the fuel surcharge goes up, line haul rates, the underlying component goes down, which is kind of strange in a way. But contract rates, though, contract rates, which the bulk of the freight's moving on, will of course be higher. They'll start to go up as the fuel surcharge goes up. So yeah, it's a bizarre thing, because you would think that as diesel prices go up, carriers would ask for more. What actually happens is the opposite occurs. It's happened all year. It's a really strange phenomenon. So what you'll see, I think, when I do my report this Sunday, is rates fell again against 32 cents a gallon increase in diesel. So there's margin somewhere. Someone's making margin.
Is that just this year, Dean, that you're seeing that phenomenon?
No, it's normally. No, that happens all. It's standard, yeah.
Really? See, you learn something new every day. So when fuel prices go up, typically spot rate goes down.
Yeah, the line haul component. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, no. Oh, okay. So line haul component, because you're spending more on fuel, so the line haul component goes down. But you're not seeing spot rates get cheaper. They're just kind of remaining the same.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
In times when demand is hot, right, you'll see the underlying line haul rate go up the other direction. It'll start to increase. We're
I've seen
that right now.
Yeah, I've seen a few lanes that actually have increased the spot.
Right.
Pretty good, over June and July. Several of them, I was like, that's interesting, because it was kind of the adverse effect from what we were talking about, Dean, that it was pretty flat. And I saw these movements I was looking at different lanes, and I was like, what's going on? And we talked about the worst case scenario, Dean, not too long ago, about the increase in fuel surcharges and how detrimental it's going to be for these carriers. And you were saying they were at 2,000 exiting a month, I think it was.
Yeah, it's about 1,700. About 1,700 in July. It's backed off a little bit, but it's still, a chunk of carriers are still leaving.
Well, we're going to see more if this continues to go, because the little guy's not going to be able to run. He's not going to be profitable, and we're going to see that jump like crazy.
Last month we said.
Jeff, let me ask you this. Is it the little guy, or is it the little guy that has no dedicated customers playing in the spot market? Because I see the little guy. Obviously, the U.S. is North America is made up, I think, 85% of small carriers. Is that correct? That there's somewhere around that number, like 85, 90%.
Thereabouts.
So I think we're going to see an exodus of the guys and the gals that maybe have a few trucks, maybe they're owner operators, but they don't have steady lanes. I don't see Rico going out of business because fuel's going up, right?
The transactional.
Rico's got his lanes that he moves. He's conducting his owner operator business, as a business, as opposed to like a Fortune 500 company, as opposed to just an owner operator business. Like I see those guys sticking around. It's maybe those smaller carriers or a couple of trucks or owner ops that don't understand their ROI, like don't understand their P&L, and are kind of getting to Salt Lake City and going, how am I getting out of here? I may as well hit the load board. No? What do you guys think?
It's going to be the carrier that has the most exposure to the spot market, right? So it's not Rico, whose dedicated contract where they have a fixed rate or a rate that is a fair rate. It's going to be someone who's predominantly chasing spot market loads from market to market, where you're most exposed to price volatility, but also high diesel prices on long haul, because you're burning a lot of fuel on the long distance runs. You've got more, depending on the direction you travel, you can have pretty big headwinds if you're traveling west. That can burn a lot more fuel. Mountains can burn a lot more fuel. So your operating costs are very different depending on geography. But if you've got exposure to the spot market and you're not on well-balanced lanes, you could end up, on a head haul lane with a pretty good rate and a back haul lane that's under $1 a mile, like some are right now. So
where you fill up might be way more expensive than where you originally filled up. So now you got that variable as well, right?
Unless if you're fortunate to be hitting the top of West Virginia and there's 3 exits where it's going to be really, really cheap, you could blow past those 3 exits if you blinked, which I did a few months ago, and I missed out on saving about $1.50 a gallon, because in that state it's really, really cheap.
That's a lot. Yeah.
I could have bought for $3.25 in West Virginia. And this was like at midnight, but I was so tired. I thought I'll pull off the next exit. Next thing, it's $5 in Pennsylvania. I ended up paying $5.50 at a truck stop.
Wow, that's huge.
So there's a big variance across the country, right? There's only one area, the Gulf Coast, that's under $4 this week. Everywhere else is north of $4 a gallon. So it's going to be, these are really tough times. This is notwithstanding the fact that our economic news is not that good. When you think about the manufacturing index that came out yesterday, this is the 9th straight month of manufacturing contraction. Although of the 18 indices in the ISM Purchasing Managers Index, 8 of them showed increases, which was good news. So it's like less bad news. It's still bad news, but it's not as bad as what it could have been. So I mean, I think we're all looking for that glimmer of hope that the market will turn around. It's still behaving like it's flat, which is what we've always said it would be. It'll be a flat rest of this year. As I'm writing about for my blog post next week, our worst fears are sort of starting to be realized as this second half gets well underway, which was that it turned out like 2019 did, which was, if you look at spot rates in 2019, they kind of started off and just went in sort of this straight line all the way down by about 10 to 12 cents. No peak season, nothing to speak of. People are already talking about a non-existent peak season now, ahead of what would normally be peak volumes.
But have we not kind of, for the last couple of years, not really seen a peak season?
Well, we haven't. It was early, so it was much earlier in the year because people were pulling forward inventory. So it was more like June and July, I think. Even
that's what was called for this year.
Yeah. So we may have seen
even a peak, right? Like, remember we were talking even last year, and it just seemed like it was steady across the board. Like there was no major peak during or even before when we thought that peak season was. Like everybody was just pulling forward the whole year. See, I don't think we've really seen what the quote unquote, well, I mean, you go back 15 years, there was a huge peak retail season before Christmas, that September, October. And if they didn't have it in the stores by the end of October, it wasn't sold by Christmas and all that. There was a huge spike. But I think like over the last, since COVID, it's kind of leveled out, no?
I mean, there is glimmers of seasonality. Like it's... We've had so many things destabilize the market. It's hard to, you've almost got to. I tend to pull out 2022, 2021, and 2020, and when I talk about seasonality, because when I look at all of my rates going back to 2015, every year, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 23, all have this familiar pattern to them. Start off high, drop down over April, pick up to July 4, drop off, pick up at Thanksgiving, drop off a bit, and then pick up at the end of the year. They all have a similar shape, different amounts, but they're always got the same shape. 21, 22, 20, all off the charts, all over the place. No seasonality, right? So it's a really good question. While we're chatting here, I'm just running the July numbers from Peers database on imports to the end of July, just to see what the uncertified numbers look like this morning.
One of the biggest indicators of where the market is going to go is the corrugated vendors and packaging companies out there, and they've been down. I mean, I've seen some data on that is just like crazy. Now, when you start seeing that industry start peaking and start moving above the plus, they're all in a negative right now, massively.
Right.
That's when you're going to see movement in the freight business, because you can't move products that aren't packaged. That's a huge indicator. So if you start watching that, that's going to tell you volumes of what's going to happen in the very, very near future. And it's been horrible for a long time, for a few months. Very, very bad.
Well, remember on our show last week, we talked about some of the data points Jason Miller was talking about on our show. Paper, one of the things he said, the fourth most impactful data point in his truckload ton mile index the fourth most was paper, and paper manufacturing was down 6% year over year. So to your point, Jeff, that's a really important component of demand, as is food, chemicals, mining, things like that. So that's a good read, because everything we haul kind of gets packaged. You're right.
Oh yeah.
Now, even with people reducing package, it's still a good indicator. I mean, because you could never reduce package completely. Skid's got to be shrink wrapped. You know what I mean?
Right.
They got to have, even if they're layers, they got to have cardboard layers sticking up to hold the product on top, and all that kind of jazz.
Yeah, I mean, some of them use the 48 by 48 cardboard sleeves to put in between the product to make the pallet more rigid when they shrink wrap it, so to decrease the chances of claims happening, so you're looking at corner boards, you're looking at shelving in between the products, the packaging itself, whether it's small packages, even if you look for batteries, everything is packaged, plastic and cardboard and all of that. Those are the indicators that are going to tell you what market's going to move, because if you look at size of cartons, where it's going compared to the larger size cartons. It's a huge indicator. It really is.
Yeah. Even if you go like as far as Amazon repackages the package, right, in an Amazon box. So every single thing that goes out the door requires the Amazon tape and Amazon box go out the door.
And then you look
plus
at
the little bubble things.
Right. And then you look at the recycling business as well. That will be a great indicator, because a lot of these recyclers out there that do cardboard, they remove the dunnage and everything. So when that dunnage starts going down and they're not making as much pickups, that's another indicator as well, as far as what the industry is doing and where that is. Like Amazon, if they're doing 100 truckloads a week at big DCs of dunnage, just saying, and it goes down to 25. There's a problem.
Yeah.
I had a look at another data point yesterday, and the first time I'd seen it, it was called and I'll quote here, it's called the Cutting Tool Market Report. I don't know if you've ever heard of this report. It was kind of fascinating, but the primary consumable in manufacturing is the cutting tool, is the thesis. And it says that analysis of cutting tool consumption is a leading indicator of upturns and downturns in US manufacturing activity, which I thought, wow, that's an interesting claim. But I could see that, whether it doesn't matter what, at the pointy end of all production, you probably got cutting tools. May consumption was up 10% month over month and up 20% compared to May last year. But volumes had been falling off for the best part of this year and started to flatten out. So it's kind of too early to make some sort of directional statement that, we're on the upswing, because even though volumes are up, it may be a lagged indicator. We still, even though we're buying more cutting tools, I can't definitively say that that's because we're making more stuff, because the other data says that we're not. So anyway, I thought I'd throw that out there because cutting tools is something you'd never think of. Just like the folks on TV, you see the ads for Granger, the people that get things done. Granger make a lot of things that we use in building and construction. Mm-hmm. Their annual reports are very important, as are Caterpillar's earnings calls that kind of came. I think they came out yesterday. So some of these earnings calls.
Did you see the Caterpillar earnings calls?
I did. And there are all sorts of things we've got to watch. Is what the people on the earnings calls are saying for the end of second quarter, as to what they think the outlook's going to be. Remember that the one point that because trucking's a leading indicator or a leading and lagging indicator of the economy. One thing that stuck with me is Darren Field's comment from JP Hunt. And I said this last week. It's worth repeating that all of our customer forecasts turned out to be wrong. And that was something that you heard a lot of truckload carriers talk about at the start of the year. Even I fell victim to believing that from shippers, that they said these are, we've got really robust outlook. We think things are going to be strong. We expect consumer demand to come back, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it turns out that wasn't the case. And I think Jason Miller said it very well last week. Most manufacturers and wholesalers don't know where we're at. They don't know where the consumer is at the moment. And I think and he summed up his on the show by saying that people are reluctant to make the same mistake they did last year by over-ordering. So we may not see.
They want to complete their inventories and make room for new inventories. I mean, just think about it. I mean, when we discussed all that product that had dates on it, 2022 and everything that sat, or Halloween and Christmas that had 2022 on it that didn't move. What do they do with that? They have to shred it, get rid of it. They're not going to sell it because it's date specific, So they lose on that side, and they're trying to get rid of all this obsolete inventory to make room for the new whenever that happens.
Mm-hmm. So the Wall Street, was it not the Wall Street Journal? New York Times sent out, I don't know, but the Wall Street Journal. I get the logistics report every day. And it's just interesting because a couple of the things that were yesterday, Caterpillar's revenue surged 22% last quarter as high construction demand offset rising parts costs. So that was interesting. Uber Technologies posted its first ever operating profit in the second quarter ever, which is pretty important. Here's interesting. DHL's second quarter revenue fell 16%. On a sharp drop in freight business, pulling operating profit down 27% to about 1.85 billion. So revenue fell 16%, but profit fell 28%. Toyota, on the other hand, their net profit jumped 78% in the second quarter as rising sale prices offset higher material costs. Very interesting.
The Caterpillar earnings. Caterpillar is reflected in what we hear in trucking, and that is that there is still a lot more commercial construction going on. There's a lot more, still strong demand for machinery moves.
And here was another one. Canadian trucker Titanium Transportation acquires Georgia-based Crane Transport for $59 million. So Titanium's growing, right? Obviously, there's companies that are still doing well, or they're taking advantage of the market, knowing this is only going to go do this, right? We're kind of in that low. But it was interesting that measure of factory activity in the U.S. improved slightly from last month, but firmly remained in contraction, and that was from Market Watch. So it's interesting, right? Because it was 46.4%.
Yeah, the ISM PMI. Yep.
Yeah, from 46% in prior months.
Yeah, 46. So anything below 50 is contraction. It's had 9 months below 50, which is significant. I think the LMI came out yesterday too. The LMI is the Logistics Managers Index. Came out also at an all-time low. It's contracted 3 times.
45.4.
It's contracted 3 times in its 7-year history, and all 3 of those have been the last 3 months. So that's contraction means below 50. Zach Rogers, who writes the LMI, said that the weak LMI was driven by continued weakness in transportation and softening in warehousing indices.
Yeah, the logistic manager index for the U.S. logistics activity in July down from 45.6 in June, and the fifth straight month the index has reached a record low. It's 55.4.
Yeah. The US bank shipments index came out this week too, which was, they do it each quarter. US bank shipments is similar to CAS, the CAS freight payments. They're a US bank, they're a freight payment organization on this side. Volumes are down 1.2% in the second quarter and 9% year over year. So whichever way you look at it, when someone like Jason Miller says demand is going to be flat this year, I tend to take really good notice of that, because most of the other indices are sort of thereabouts. Some are a little bit more, some are a little bit less. It depends on the mix of freight that the index is based on. So rates are coming down. Rates are still coming down, right? So I mean, shippers will still be looking for RFPs for rates to come in lower. I suspect that's going to be a discussion they're going to have. We'll still end up with a lot of.
I already had that discussion.
Underpriced freight. Yeah. So this is going to be interesting times, right? Is the next market cycle, because there'll be a lot of freight out there that's still pretty cheap, and it's going to, when the market turns, those rates are going to start to move back up again, and they'll be rejected, those loads, pretty quickly, I'd imagine.
So now my question becomes this, from a shipper perspective: is now really the right time to do an RFP?
Well, it's going to be a short one. I can tell you that way, because it's not sustainable. Number one.
But I mean, why do it? Listen, RFPs, unless you're doing it yourself, they cost a lot of money, right? If you get like a Blue Jay or somebody to do your RFPs, there's a huge cost associated with it. So, would you rather spend that 60, 70 grand in your logistics budget or doing an RFP? And I think at this point, as much as shippers want better pricing, they're doing it, and in 90 to 120 days, maybe a little bit longer, it's going to just shift. And when people start rejecting it, then stuff goes to the spot market. Then there's an opportunity for double brokering. There's exposure, right?
Yeah, of course. But the thing, Dan, is that the first thing the smart shippers will do, they'll go out to their incumbent carriers if they have dedicated runs, and they're going to go, listen, we've been following the market. Can you do any better? We want you in our corral. We want to help you. We want to keep on giving you freight. However, the market is dictating this. I don't want to squeeze you, but what can you do for us? Can you help us? We'll keep you fed. We're going to give you that. We know it's not sustainable, but why that market is down, what can you do for us? And the shippers remember that very, very well. The ones that will adjust to work with them, and the ones that don't adjust, that don't want to work with them. And as their business grows, guess who they're going to go with? The ones that worked with them to help them out, and they'll remember that. So I mean, it's not sustainable. It's not.
I say the carrier, whoever the supplier is, go to the customer today and have that conversation. Don't make the customer come to you.
Right. I mean, don't go to the one-off guys. I mean, go to your incumbent on the dedicated ones, the ones that you have hit or miss here and there. Don't even bother with them. I mean, it's just go to where the meat and potatoes are. Don't look at this year. Protect yourself and put yourself in a good position for 2024. That's what you want to do now. The way the year looks right now, my own advice, it's over. This year is completely over. It's going to be flat. I mean, just all indicators are saying we're not going to see any kind of movement on rates or anything until the first quarter, maybe deep into the second quarter of next year. This isn't the time to do it. This is the time to build those long-term business relationships with the carriers you have in your hand. You want to build those relationships. You don't want to destroy them. Work together and look towards 2024.
So, Jeff,
I agree. Now, especially as a broker, now is the time to build relationships.
Absolutely.
Jeff, I heard a broker say the other day that we're just starting RFP season. Is that
Yeah.
is there an RFP season that you can nail down to a
Well, you
period
know
of
what?
time?
It all depends on what vertical you're looking at. Now,
Right.
if you're looking at the CPG, that's mostly Japanese, and they work on a different type of fiscal year. Their fiscal year ends on March 31st, and they start on April 1st. So they
Right.
kind of put it out there in November, December, giving them a little bit of time to put things
Mhm.
together, because those big guys that are out there, the Panasonics and all of them out there, they want to get all that information back because they're big hitters. They have a huge transportation spend, and they go out and they create their primary, their secondary, their tertiary
Yeah.
in order of pricing and anything like that. Like what I did, you know, I always say this. It's like, I don't fire carriers, carriers fire themselves. So I just ask
Right.
them, plain and simple, put your best foot forward. What can you do this business for? You
Mhm.
know your business better than I do. Okay. Let's work on this. Let's see. And it kind of works out, but it really depends on the verticals. You know, some
Okay.
start on January 1st, April 1st,
Right.
you know,
Right.
it really all depends. Would I put an RFP out right now? No, I wouldn't do it. I mean, you know,
Because it won't
like
hold.
Dan said, it's costing you too much when you look, depending upon the size of your business and the operation, and how many hands are going to be in that RFP and how many modes that you're using. It's a complete waste, because you're only looking at the smart carriers and brokers out there that are going to respond are only going to go maybe 6 to maybe 12 weeks deep in there. They're not going to lock it in for a year. Anybody that does that's stupid. They're going to learn, they're going to lose their shirt, number one. So you have to be smart about it, you know. And the shippers I deal with, I tell them straight out, hey, listen, I'll do this for you now, but when that market turns, we're having another discussion.
Right.
You know, don't
Right.
think that these rates that are so suppressed right now are going to go for a whole year. Ain't happening. So, I mean, you know, you have to be smart about it. Definitely.
Yeah, Ryan would be probably one of the best ones to ask that question to, because he's selling all the time and he's involved in a ton of RFPs. I do know there used to be an RFP season, which was typically August, September, October, so they can get things implemented for Jan 1. Then there's also, you're seeing a lot of shippers starting RFPs in January for the year. And then now shippers have, I think it's, and I'd love your thoughts, guys. I think it's all over the place, because some people have done RFPs already. Some people are about to get into them. Some people aren't going to do them for another year. They're just going to extend their contracts that they already have. I think everybody's kind of scrambling at this point.
Everybody's
and they're doing what's best for their particular business in whatever they're doing. Like, two of my customers that typically do RFPs are saying, you know what, we're not doing it this year. I asked why, and they said because we're happy with the way things are going, and you know what, the volume is just not there to bother going to market, spending all this time, energy, effort, and money, because it takes employee costs and everything. Like, it's a lot of work
SG&A
to put an
costs.
RFP. Yeah, for sure. And then it's, if we do make a switch, is that 2% or 3% or 5% worth retraining everyone to get the job done right?
But you're
And
trying to build loyalty too, Dan. I mean, think about that.
100%.
If you're switching your carriers midstream, you're not showing them any partnerships. You're not showing them loyalty. You guys have to collaborate and be congruent. What are your goals? What are your objectives? And vice versa. How can we work together to make this work? That's the biggest
And Jeff,
question
you might
that
be
has to
seeing
happen.
more of this as well, is carriers that are doing so well in the RFPs that they've been in, they're actually sitting down and having conversations. The customer's sitting down and having conversations because they would rather help them get better than switch.
And that's what's important about having carrier roundtables. It's not about discussing rates and accessorials and all. It's about, how is your business doing? What do you need from us? And vice versa. Here's what we're working on. Here's our new product line. Here's when we're going to start ramping up. Do you have the capacity that can hit us? You can provide us in March? This is when we're predicting our new product line is going to be launched. You know, you start preparing them. You start working in that for the long term, not the short term, because you're building partnerships. That's the most important thing. And a lot of brokers out there, I'm sorry to say this, they don't have those carrier roundtables where you bring all your carriers in on a conference call with a shipper that you put in there and say, let's talk, guys. Let's tighten up the loose ends and let's see where we can get congruent. We're all on the same page. This is what we need to do. And it doesn't
I also think there's a secondary conversation that I think after 2019 should be had is what's your financial stability?
Yeah.
Like if you're using smaller carriers, all honesty, like my business might serve 5% of your fleet, 2% of your fleet. What's the other 95, 98% doing? What's your financial stability? And I think as a shipper or broker, it's appropriate for you in today's day and age to ask that question.
Yes.
Because if we're losing carriers 100%, because you know, the person you're speaking with might not even know. You know, you might be talking with an operations manager or a dispatch manager or a VP of business development, but they might not understand the P&L of the actual company, right? And I think as a shipper, as somebody whose freight is on somebody else's equipment, whether you deal with a broker or not, I'd want to know the financial stability of the people actually hauling my freight down the road, and of the broker. Don't get me wrong, and of the broker.
Oh,
I'd want to know, are you a stable company? Or are you going to be gone in 3 months? And I'm spending all this time and effort to redo it in 3 months. But not only that, you locked me out at the 11th hour, right? Because the president of the company and the person that actually makes the decision to shut down, most of the time doesn't tell anyone in the line.
Yes,
so everybody's doing this business as usual.
Yes, and the other two important entities that you must bring into the conversation is the sales and operation team. It is a must. They have to be part of those conversations because they know what's happening in the background, like you're saying, Dan. You know, it has to be group, because if you leave those departments out, you're losing critical information that's going to help you to move your business forward, profitable. True, it's a fact. You know, you get them in there, you have a better big picture of what's happening, and vice versa. You know, get your key guy from the carrier, you know, the vice president of sales, operations. They know the pricing, they know all that. Have them come in on these meetings as well. You know, you have to have these guys with the mind.
It's where transparency comes in, right?
Yes.
Like, if you think about it, I think the days they should be gone where brokers, you know, don't talk about their margins. Brokers make money. Everyone needs to make
Everybody
money.
makes money.
Especially if you're cost plus with your customer, there's no secrets. Like, there's no secrets. Like Dean says, leave something on the table for somebody else. Hey, man, I'm 15% above the cost. I'm going to bring in all 5 suppliers that are going to run your business efficiently and profitably. And I'm sorry, but I want to make a profit, just as you do, Mr. Customer, just as everybody does. I don't think anyone's in it for practice. I mean, call a spade a spade.
It's right. It's like you go to a department store.
Exactly.
You go to a department store, you're going to ask your shipper, hey, you know what? I don't like the rates that you're charging $40 for this product. Can you drop it down to 30 and maybe I'll buy from you? That's the exact same thing that they're asking of you. You know, I mean, that would be my rebuttal. Hey, am I asking you to bring down your product cost?
So here's a question. Have you guys ever tried to negotiate in a store?
What's that? In a store?
In a store.
No.
It is the best conversation you'll ever have.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I've done it a million times. I love it.
Really?
But yeah. Can't say I'm successful 99.9%, but that 1% of the time it works every time. Let me tell you that. But yeah, it's actually, you guys should try it. Like, go up to the cash and go like, okay, I know it's $19.99, but I think it's really worth $15. Do we? And it's when I'm in one of those moods.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah.
That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah. So what do we got? What do we got coming up, Dean? What is it that you know, some KPIs that reps should be looking out for? Should be talking to their suppliers about fuel, volumes?
I think.
What else we got?
I think you got to watch I still go back to where we've been most of the year, and that is that the diesel price is going to be the single most influential thing on truckload capacity. So I'm going to talk truckload, and we look. It looks like our worst fears are being realised here because we've got pretty tight inventories. Inventories are on par with where they were last year. Tight inventories was why we saw nearly $6 a gallon for diesel last year. Here we are at the start of summer with one of the hottest Julys ever, apparently. A hotter than normal southeast. What did they call the maritime boiling water? They called it a maritime heat wave, something like that.
Yeah.
Hot waters in the Gulf. I'm bracing myself for hurricane season when it hits, when those hurricanes start coming across boiling hot water in the Gulf and the Atlantic. So this market has still got a lot more volatility in it. But the diesel price, and the reason I mentioned diesel prices is if you have hurricanes come up through the Gulf where all the refineries are, you're going to see a fairly big impact on the cost of fuel for all of us, whether it be heating oil going into the winter, diesel or gasoline. So I'm really concerned about
the storms this year are going to be exceptional because there's an El Nino happening coming from west to east.
Yeah.
And it is apparently going to bring some crazy storms through the southeast,
and
all the way up
too.
the east coast more frequently, and some of the most now again predictions, but more intense storms than we've seen in a while.
We've seen them gather increase in intensity as they approach landfall. That's been a feature of the last few, not just in this hemisphere. It's also in the southern hemisphere where they have cyclones. Kind of
and you know something. What happens with these hurricanes and tornadoes and all of that? You start seeing the flatbed market start exploding because they're the ones that are bringing all those supplies and everything down there. So the more storms they have, the better off the flatbed industry is, even though we don't want to see those storms and we're not asking for those storms, but it's a true fact. It's a true fact.
It's a fact.
Yeah, I mean, FEMA started buying up most of the trucks, right? And then you got capacity tightening on every other end.
And it affects everybody else who needs those flatbeds, and the rates start going up real high. They know exactly where the money is.
Like everything, it's just
the demand is different by the type of hurricane. The wind events have more timber destruction, whereas the flooding events have a different level of impact on the markets because of lack of accessibility. Wind events, you can generally get in there once they clear the debris, but there's a lot more timber destruction. So you've got a lot more rebuilding effort. So we've got to watch for those along the Gulf Coast. So I'm really concerned about the price of diesel. So I think if you said, what's the one thing we need to watch? I think it's the direction, the inventories, geopolitical risk, what's OPEC Plus doing, what's Russia doing, what's China's economy doing, the biggest importer of crude in the world. Those are the sorts of things that affect our global inventories. When you go to the pump, they all have an impact on the price you pay. So with the backdrop of very lackluster freight demand, rising fuel prices are the thing that I fear that will have the biggest impact in the next couple of quarters on the trucking industry. And to Jeff's point, the reason why you wouldn't do an RFP now is because it's not going to hold water. Because as diesel prices go up, we're going to find more carriers squeezed out of the industry very shortly if they continue to rise, which tightens the market. And then we get to same number of loads of trucks. Soon we get to more loads than trucks, and then you've got a market start to tighten, which is what Jeff is saying. Shippers are aware. Most of the clued-in shippers are aware the market will turn, and when it turns, there'll be more loads than trucks because we are heading into a period where there are fewer trucks by the day. I looked at our data for the end of July. July was the fewest number of carriers joined and the fewest number of carriers left. So the gap is closing, right? Yep. But we're still leaking, 1,500 to 2,000 carriers a month in the interstate long haul sector out of the spot market. Yep. But we had the fewest carriers come in and the fewest leave in nearly 12 months, which I thought was an interesting data point because I was always wondering, what are people joining this industry for? And we had Nicole Glenn on our show yesterday. She made a really good point about the fact that freight forwarders and others are consolidating full loads and shipping it on line haul truckload as opposed to LTL. So, and I said, is that a long-term change? And she said, absolutely. It's not a reaction. It's a long-term change, which makes you think expedited trucks, box trucks, straight trucks, liftgate trucks, and open deck hotshots that market is sustainable for carriers, and they make up a lot of the interstate carriers. So I think there'll be winners and losers as we go through this quarter. But I'm watching things like diesel prices to change the supply level of the trucking industry the most in the next few months.
And wait until September comes. Let's see how August pans out. I don't think it's going to be good. I think we're going to see, if this continues, the graph I sent you guys, that was a steep climb. That was a huge climb. And if it continues like that, we're in trouble.
Well, on next week's show, I'll have the import numbers, Jeff. To your point, I suspect they're going to come in lower, which means July could have been the peak. I thought August might be the peak, but I may well be wrong and eating my words next Wednesday when we're on the show, Dan. But next Wednesday we'll be talking about imports. Heard it here first.
Hedge your bet. Hedge your bet.
Imports next week will tell us a lot about, I think, where we're headed.
Now you can go to Bet365 and get the over/under on that right now, folks. If you head over, thanks, guys.
I'm going on the under Grumpy Pete.
Next week's going to be critical, so make sure to tune in. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Guys.
Let's. You know what? This is going to be. It's going to be interesting. The next couple of weeks are going to be redefining, and go out there and have those conversations with your shippers. Give them the data. Like have that conversation. Like Jeff said, be transparent. Have that conversation.
Take heed.
Good advice.
It's
great advice.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.